Good morning, everybody. This is Man Coverage. It is Knoxville Nate and JB James Bonneville on the dial. It is October 23rd, 2022. It is 1 p.m. Eastern Time. It is day after college football Saturday. James, how are you doing today, buddy?
And he better be a crime.
I like it. We are on, let me see, week 8 now in college football. Things are starting to take shape. And once again, we had some crazy football games yesterday. And I want to go ahead and jump right into it. The game that I want to get into and I've got the most questions about is obviously one of the teams that is in the top 4 right now, or top 5, excuse me, depending on which poll you look at. The Clemson Tigers. They were playing at home yesterday. They welcomed in the 6-0 at the time Syracuse Orangemen. And, you know, the Orangemen were in control. They were up 21-10 at halftime. But Syracuse never scored again. Obviously, you know, we need to give some, credit to the coaching staff. Everybody thought the defense might drop off with Venables leaving. Well, I don't really see much of a drop off, to be honest with you. It looks like there's a huge drop off from Lincoln Riley leaving Oklahoma to Venables taking over as head coach. But honestly, the Clemson defense hasn't gone down much, in my opinion. They gave up 0 points in the second half. They held Garrett Schrader under 170 yards passing. They picked him off. They had, I think they had a couple other turnovers, but they just, sound tackling, good coverage. They got an interception to end the game. But obviously, the biggest thing we need to talk about is the quarterback. DJU gets pulled. In goes the freshman. We talked about this ad nauseum before the season, that if DJU struggled like he did last year, we didn't think there would be any hesitation from Johnny Coach down there at Clemson, Mr. Dabo Swinney, to pull the trigger. And he really hasn't. I mean, yesterday he took him out. Cade didn't have to throw it a whole lot because Clemson ran it for 293 yards. But after the game, I'm like, okay, well, here comes the change. They got the victory with the freshman at quarterback. They're going to make the move, but he insists that DJU is still the quarterback. Why? What's up with the loyalty to him? Why doesn't he just go ahead and make the move? Do you think it's that he feels like the freshman isn't ready? Do you feel like he's got loyalty to DJU? Tell me, James, what's going on down there?
I think it's loyalty factor. I mean, look at how long it took him to. I mean, it was very blatant that Trevor Lawrence was a better quarterback than Kelly Bryant, and look how long it took him before he actually made the switch there. And Trevor Lawrence was the number 1 player in the country coming out the year before. He is very loyal to guys that have been going through the program. He's always been a culture guy. I mean, got to remember, when he got brought in, he was a receivers coach. He wasn't a coordinator, but people liked him in the administration because he was such a good recruiter, and he builds his team on culture. I think he's going to go down with DJU if DJU still can't take it to that next level. But I mean, you look at yesterday. I mean, they were running on Syracuse a lot. They were basically strapping that team to Will Shipley's back, and they were going to win or lose based on what he did. And he had a hell of a game. I mean, the numbers don't lie. I mean, you 27 for 172. You're getting 6.4 a clip. You had a 50-yarder. I mean, Maffa even had 94 yards too as well on 18 carries.
And a touchdown.
Yeah, I mean, they just really. I mean, when you're popping off 4.9 a clip running the ball, do you really need to pass it? I mean, it's a lot safer to run the ball.
Well, yeah, but when you're going to play, this is what I'm talking about, though. When you're going to step up the level of competition, and I'm talking about the ACC championship game, I guess.
Oh yeah,
maybe that's a step up in competition. Who knows? The other division in the ACC sucks, so I really don't even know about that. But let's say they make it to the college football playoff, and they play one of these other teams. 13 of 21, 138 yards, 2 interceptions, and a fumble. I mean, he turned the ball over 3 times in the first half. That's not going to get it done. He had a QBR of 16. I don't understand. I mean, I just don't get why he's sticking with him. I mean, Cade Klubnik, there's no way he could be worse. In fact, when he comes in, I know yesterday he only threw the ball 4 times, but if you go back to the Georgia Tech game, he came in, he took over, the crowd went nuts. He drove the team down for a score in his first ever effort. And I just think that, he's more talented of a player, and this offense seems to be more suited to him. And I don't know what's wrong. I mean, we saw what looked good in the first go round for DJU when he subbed in for Trevor Lawrence. I think it was 2020. He came in, played 2 games where he started against Notre Dame and Boston College, and he looked pretty good. But since then, it has not been good. And so I'm not sure what we're waiting for. I'm not sure what Dabo thinks is going to happen. He's not going to get better. He's just not that good. So why not make the move now, get this kid some games under his belt, and then, have the progression where he gets better, he gets some experience, and by the time you get into big-time competition play, the freshman's ready to go. What? I mean, am I talking crazy here?
No, I agree with you. I mean, the hard part about it is that, I mean, they've played 8 games already. They only got 4 more games left on the schedule, and they're off next week, and their next game's at Notre Dame. Now, yes, is Notre Dame nearly as good as it once was? No. But it's still Notre Dame, and you're going to South Bend. Do you really want your first start by choice, not by force, to bring Cole Klubnik in there when you're undefeated? Because honestly, I look at the rest of their schedule, I don't think they're going to lose. I mean, they're going to play at Notre Dame, and then they finish off the season at home against Louisville, Miami, and South Carolina. And they're probably going to play North Carolina for the ACC title game. I mean, I think they're backdooring their way into a college football playoff berth, but you and I both know they're going to get their doors blown off because they're just not a good – I mean, sadly enough, you may want to take a 2-loss team over Clemson, who's undefeated, which is going to irritate the crap out of people. But
yeah, only in South Carolina. I mean, I've watched this team play several times, including yesterday, and I don't see it. I'm not like blown away by their offense. Their defense is good, but at times, like in the first half, giving up 21 points to Syracuse, it doesn't impress me. So I don't see this as a top 4 team. I mean, I think 5 is being generous, even though they're undefeated. I mean, who have they beat? Which is the game that you go back to and are like, whoa, this is where you've seen, the Tigers and at their best. I just don't think they're that good. I think their only chance is to put this freshman in. And I think Dabo, I get it. The guy's won 2 national championships. He knows what he's doing, but I think he's hurting his team by not getting this kid involved more right now.
I would agree with you on that. I mean, you got to, I mean, at some point you got to play for the playoff. I mean, because you look at their schedule, they haven't played a complete game on both sides of the ball except maybe Boston College.
Yeah, that would be the best game I've seen of them so far.
I mean, I would
Boston
say
College sucks.
Offensively, you could say Wake Forest, but I mean, defensively, their defensive backs just got torched in that game.
Yeah.
I just I don't know. It's like they're putting this together with baling wire and duct tape because the ACC is just that weak. I mean, everybody's got a flaw. Wake Forest has no defense. North Carolina has no defense. Florida State has no depth. Miami is a train wreck.
Oh my God. Yeah, let's talk about that for a second too. I mean, I didn't even want to get into it today, but I think we have to. What is going on down there? I mean, the Canes, they were supposed to be back. They went out, they paid all this money for Mario Cristobal, and then Middle Tennessee State happened, and they got embarrassed by the Middle Tennessee State Raiders at home, giving up, 45 points or whatever it was. And then yesterday, they welcome in the Duke Blue Devils, and Duke hangs 45 points on them again. I mean, what the hell is going on down there, James? I mean, this Canes team doesn't look any better than it did under Manny Diaz.
It looks worse. But I will say, I think Mike Elko is doing a hell of a job with what he has at Duke. But there's no freaking way Miami should allow 45 being thrown on them at home against Duke. No way.
Well, and what we saw from Middle Tennessee State was them throwing the ball all over them. Duke didn't really throw it that much. They only completed 13 passes for 136 yards. They gave up over 200 yards on the ground and 4 touchdowns to the Blue Devils.
Yeah. And when's Duke ever had a power running game?
Never.
I mean, Steve Spurrier era, they threw the ball. I mean, you go back through all their great coaches, which that list is very short. They always threw the ball. Now, I mean, you drop 200. I mean, they should be throwing parades in Durham right now. I mean, Mike Elko's done a hell of a job, but man, Cristobal, this is not good. I mean, I'm starting to realize now when people were complaining about Justin Herbert and about how he was being held back and they blamed Andy Avalos for that, I'm blaming Cristobal. I mean, this offense looks very pedestrian where they just want to meatball it up. And if I'm Tyler Van Dyke, I'm thinking about maybe throwing my hat in the portal because I could see him going to Alabama. He's a good quarterback. He's just stifled by this system.
Yeah, I'm not sure how many people are going to want this guy after watching him play, and then he got injured again yesterday. I just don't know. I mean, if I was Bama, would I want this guy over who I've got coming in and who I've got on the roster? I don't know. I think he's tarnished his reputation by this season, and I'm not sure it's 100% his fault, but he hasn't looked good. I mean, before the injury yesterday, he was 11 of 16 for 81 yards for 5 yards a pass average, completion average. That's not good. And I don't know, man. I mean, they only had 7 points in the whole first half against the Duke Blue Devils. I don't want to waste a whole lot of time on the Canes because they're garbage, but that watching them lose the way it wasn't so much they lost to Duke. I kind of picked Duke to win that game, even in Miami, but the way that they lost was what really stuck out to me. I don't know what you thought.
Well, I mean, think about it 2 months ago when we were talking about predictions going into this year. And if you would have told me that Duke would beat Miami by 24, man, we could have made so much. I mean, Duke going to a bowl game this year would have been shocking. Kansas going to a bowl game this year would have been shocking. I mean, we're going to have to do a show on what the hell were we thinking, because there's a lot of teams out there that have incredibly underperformed. And I think Miami is probably top of the list of what the hell is going on. I mean, Howard Schnellenberger is just got to be turning over in his grave right now, because this is bad. This is really bad.
Yeah, they're one of the worst, most underperforming teams in all of football, I think, if not number one. So we'll see what happens from here on out. But this, it's like if they're losing to MTSU and they're losing to Duke, what's going to happen next week against Virginia? What's going to happen the following week against Florida State? Then they got Georgia Tech, who looks better. Then they go to number 5 Clemson. Then they play at home versus Pitt, who's, not bad. So, I mean, I just think they may not see another win, and they're 3-4 right now. So Canes are not looking good. But let's go out west, because that was a big game yesterday. Let's talk about Oregon for a second. They looked horrible in week 1. They were playing one of the best teams, if not the best team in Georgia. We know that. We didn't expect them to win, but they got shellackled and embarrassed. And everybody kind of wrote them off. But their head coach didn't. Dan Lanning's 36 years old. He's the youngest coach in Power 5. He didn't give up, and somehow he's turned the season completely around. And yesterday they took on number 9 undefeated UCLA at home. And who's that guy out there wearing number 10? I mean, this does not look like your daddy's Bo Nix. 22 of 28, 283 yards, 5 touchdowns. The decision making to me is completely changed around. And this defense, this Dan Lanning defense, I mean, I know they gave up 30 points, but they held UCLA, in the passing game. They played really tough, I thought, in the second half. And some of those points were after the game was decided in the fourth quarter. So give me your impression of this Oregon Ducks team, where they stand right now, and how far can they go? I mean, it looks like their team believes in what Coach Lanning's preaching.
Honestly, I think first and foremost, Bo Nix looks like a completely different player. I mean, even from the first game of the year, where he was going back into a lot of his old habits at Auburn, where he was just going after his first read, telegraphing passes. His confidence just wasn't there. I mean, quite frankly, that was a tough first game for him to go into, because it was like he never left the SEC. Even though he's wearing a different uniform, he's still playing in a stadium that he's played in before. I mean, people forget Auburn played Oregon his freshman year in his first freaking game, and he had to pull the rabbit out of the hat. Now you watch him, he's actually checking down on people. He actually looks confident in the pocket. And I mean, not only that, Bucky Irving is, I mean, we talked about him last year, the Minnesota transfer, the kid out of Chicagoland. This kid was talented. And when Minnesota lost him, they lost a really good running back who not only can help you on the ground, but in the air too as well. He's got phenomenal hands and really good hips. I mean, he really had a hell of a game. But more importantly, Oregon won the line of scrimmage, which UCLA has. I mean, they beat up Utah. And Oregon, who traditionally has had that strong offensive line and defensive line play under Cristobal, they really showed out yesterday and really kind of changed the dynamic overall for the Pac-12.
Yeah, I think both these teams are still pretty good, though. I mean, I know UCLA
absolutely.
lost, but this was on the road. I mean, Zach Charbonnet, who me and you've talked about all year long, he had 20 carries for 151 yards and was just very dynamic, in my opinion. And, I thought that DTR still had a pretty good game. He threw for 262 and 2 touchdowns, ran it over his average, for 38 yards. So, I'm not sure exactly what happened to UCLA here. I mean, the defense obviously looked lost at times. I think what Oregon was doing confused them. And then somebody who not a lot of people talk about, but a guy who was a huge recruit in Troy Franklin is having an outstanding year for Oregon.
Yes.
I mean, 8 catches, 132 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had a 50-yard touchdown. This guy, to me, is one of the best wide receivers in the Pac-12.
Agreed. 100% agreed. I mean, he really showed out yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, he's just uncoverable, it looks like at times. And, I hope that it continues for Oregon and them as they move forward. But I don't think that necessarily UCLA is done.
No, not at all.
I think they've got some, I think they've still got some life left in them. They play Stanford next week. That's a victory, in my opinion. They play Arizona State. That's a victory. Then they play Arizona. That's a victory. Their big matchup's going to be 11-19 at home versus USC. If they can win that game, I think the sky's the limit for the Bruins. What's your thoughts on that?
Honestly, I walked out of that game and thinking that this is going to be that USC-UCLA game is going to be the dictator of who plays Oregon for the Pac-12 title. And I still think it's going to be UCLA because USC just is not as strong on line of scrimmage play. I mean, Chip Kelly's done one hell of a job in Westwood. I mean, you go back throughout all the coaches that have gone through there, they've always been a very vertical-based team. Chip Kelly is a meat and potatoes guy. He relies on the run, which he always has from his days way back when he was at OC at New Hampshire all the way through today. And I'm impressed.
Yeah, me too. He's changed the culture there.
Yeah.
In UCLA, and he's really, really turned things around, in my opinion. I like what he's doing. I mean, I really do. We got a question here: early predictions for the national title matchup. We are actually going to talk about that today. When we get done, we're going to run through these games, and then me and James are both going to give a quick Heisman prediction and our national championship Final Four and our winners. So we're going to do that today just for you, Whitey White. So stick around. as they say, wherever you're from. But we need to talk about what happened in Death Valley. I guess the other Death Valley. I've always wondered, why the hell did Clemson just copy LSU? They took the same name, the Tigers, and then they call their stadium Death Valley as well. It's like, what the hell is going on?
I would love to know who went first, because I mean, I know, was it LSU that called theirs Death Valley first? Okay, I wasn't sure, because I know who was the coach at Clemson. He actually brought a rock, like that rock is from Death Valley,
right?
Which,
right.
Yeah, but yeah, I've always wondered that myself too, as well.
Yeah, it's pretty lame. But big time game yesterday in LSU. I mean, some people were questioning Brian Kelly and his offense, including myself. But and I did not. I got to be honest. I picked Ole Miss to win this game. I know they were on the road, but I just thought Ole Miss is rolling. They're 7-0. They've got a really good running game. The running game travels. But yesterday it was Jaden Daniels running the football all over the place. 45 points this LSU team put up on Ole Miss, whose defense has been good this year, previous to yesterday. And I don't know, man. It looked like to me, Jaden Daniels drops back, looks at one guy. If he's open, he throws it and completes it. If he's not open, he takes off. And I'd say that's not a good formula, but 23 carries, 121 yards, 3 rushing touchdowns. Jaden Daniels stole the show yesterday and proved that at least that he's a good runner. What did you think about this game, and where are the Tigers at this point? Do you see them crawling back into the 25?
Yeah, they're going to have to crawl back into the 25 because someone's got to be there.
Yeah.
Honestly, I look at this game, and it really the matchup that really like came smacking me in the face was LSU's defensive line really holding down that Ole Miss rushing attack, which, I mean, you look back, I mean, Ole Miss has had one hell of a rushing attack this year with Judkins, with Evans, Jackson Dart suddenly running the ball, and they held Ole Miss to 37 carries, 116 yards, 3.1 average. So they were trying to make Ole Miss a passing team. And Jackson Dart did not have the greatest of games, 19-34 and an interception. I mean, a 64.8 QBR. I mean, Jaden Daniels, I mean, granted, when you're bringing his lineup up where he was talking about the one read or run, I mean, who does that remind you of from an SEC time but other than Bo Nix? But that defense really helped out that offense today and kind of exposed Ole Miss for what they were. They don't seem like they're taking that next step.
They're not getting better.
Yeah, they're not.
And that's not good as you go towards the end of the season. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, I don't think really that Jackson Dart was the problem yesterday. They still, Judkins still ran for 111 yards and 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, but outside him, who else did they have? They had
nobody. I mean, that Malik Heath had 8 catches for 145 yards. He had a good game, but they've been getting a lot of yards on the ground from Jackson Dart. And yesterday, he was just hopeless in the running game. So that didn't look good. And then the biggest problem to me was obviously on defense. Giving up 45 points to LSU was just not going to cut it. And I think this is a bad look for Ole Miss, especially going into a couple of big games coming up for them.
If you were going to tell me that LSU at the beginning of the year would throw up 45 against Ole Miss, you can't tell me you didn't think that Kayshon Boutte was not going to get at least 2 of those touchdowns. That guy has barely existed this year. And you look at his size and speed, I mean, I thought he was possibly the number 2 receiver going to be picked in this draft behind JSN.
Yeah, me too. And both those guys have done nothing really all season. JSN tried to play. We'll talk about them in a minute. He tried to play yesterday and couldn't do it. And Boutte's just been a non-factor, in my opinion. So it's kind of crazy that the 2 guys that I really saw as the best wide receivers coming back in college football have done nothing to speak of. So that's pretty crazy. But, good win for LSU. I think some of the Brian Kelly detractors kind of took that one on the chin yesterday because he coached a good ball game. He had a really solid game plan going in. and both offensively and defensively, and that was a huge win for them. If you think about it, their 2 losses, they lost to Florida State in a game that really they could have won. They missed that extra point that cost them the game in that crazy one. Then they got shellackled by UT. Well, that's so of a lot of people. So, LSU definitely, I think, is going to get back in the top 25 and has some life left in them, and it looks like to me moving forward.
Who would you say is the second best team in the SEC West? Like, forget records, just look at teams.
I don't know, but I can tell you that each week it's been someone different. At the start of the season, we were thinking Arkansas. I think then we were really thinking Ole Miss. Then at a time, I think we thought maybe Mississippi State. They've fallen off hard. It seems like each week it's somebody different. I kind of think it's almost LSU right now. Do you?
I would have to say you're right. I mean, it just nobody seems consistent whatsoever. I mean, there's just from week to week, you don't know what team you're going to get. But I mean, the one thing about Brian Kelly is the highs and lows aren't that different. His teams are always pretty stable overall, where some of these teams, man, you don't know what you're going to get from week to week. I mean, you look at Arkansas just laying the wood to BYU, but then looking completely malaised against Texas A&M, which, I mean, we could have a whole show on Texas A&M and what disaster train wreck that place is, but yeah.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that actually today a little bit, but there was one point, and I wanted to bring this up before we got off this game. There was one point with 14 minutes and 57 seconds left in the second quarter. Ole Miss was up 17-3, okay, on LSU. From that point on, LSU went on a tear and outscored them 42-3. So they scored 3 more points the rest of the game with almost 3 quarters. They scored 3 points. So looks like coaching to me and some adjustments. And all those people up in Notre Dame, South Bend that wanted to get Brian Kelly out of there, acted like they did after he chose to leave. They acted like they were glad he was gone. I bet they would welcome his ass back with open arms right now. Because he's a pretty good football coach. I mean, I know he's a DICK, but he knows what he's doing on the football field. So it's not a popularity contest, folks. It's a football game, and he knows what he's doing. Let's talk about the Buckeyes for a minute. Struggled a little bit in the first half. Iowa defense obviously came to play. They watched their film. They've got great players. Campbell, I've got to agree with you. He's a really good linebacker. Their secondary is much better than I thought they were. And they gave Ohio State problems. I mean, holding Ohio State to 16 points in the first quarter doesn't sound great, but it was because it was all field goals. They would get in the red zone and I would really tighten it up. And I was impressed by them. Of course, their offense is just god-awful. I mean, if they could do anything on offense, they would have had a chance, not maybe to win, but to be in this game. Does he going to fire his son? I mean, can he fire his son? He has to. I mean, let's talk about Spencer Petras for a minute. These numbers actually don't tell the whole story. 6 of 14, 49 yards, 2 interceptions, and a fumble. So he had 3 turnovers in the first half. He eventually got pulled, but the other guy wasn't any better. How bad is this Iowa offense?
It's bad. Like, it's very, very bad. Yeah, I mean, and it all starts with their offensive line. I mean, because there were some people believe all you got to do is take out Spencer Petras. You could put in Aaron freaking Rodgers with this offense. If they run the same plays, the same result would have happened yesterday. Their offensive line's a mess. The receivers aren't good, and they don't have if you don't have a good offensive line, it's tough to run the ball. It's this cataclysm, and I feel bad for this defense. I mean, 54 points, thinking, man, Ohio State just rolled them. There's so many times Ohio State had short field after short field after short field. I mean, I can only imagine your defense. You walk on the field and you're like, you're just hoping you get a break, that they get a first down so you can get at least an extra drink and take your breath.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is just it's embarrassing watching Iowa's. I mean, there's got to be problems in that locker room.
Oh, there
I
has to be. There has to be. I mean, if I'm on that defensive side and the offense comes off the field and I'm like, you're making me go back out there again, and I'd be like, guys, can you just do something? I mean, I don't care what it is, just stay on the field for more than 5 minutes so that I can like get my shoulder pads fixed while the break is going on. I mean, it's sad, honestly, because that defense is solid, and the defense doesn't even look good when you look at the scoreboard because it's 54-10. But
yeah,
that's not the defense's fault. I mean, they ran out of gas. They were on the field the entire game, and after a while, Ohio State's receiving core is gonna take over. But only if you give them chance after chance after chance after chance. But this defense really played good, and I was very impressed with the Hawkeyes defense.
I mean, it's sad to say when you can say you dropped 54 points on somebody and really didn't look good. I mean, Ohio State did not look good yesterday. I mean, if I'm a coach looking at basically how to beat Ohio State, I would use the model that Notre Dame did. Do not allow them to get those explosion plays. Make them do a methodically get the ball down the field, have a 10, 12, 14 play drive because and you got to keep it close. I mean, your offense has got to be there where you got to keep it close. And because once you get in the red zone, Ohio State tightens up a little bit just because they're always looking for that 20 plus yard play all the time.
Well, they've been unstoppable in the red zone all year. I mean, I think in 27 trips they'd scored like 24 touchdowns and 3 field goals until yesterday. And then yesterday it was bad. And the biggest takeaway to me was the rushing attack. I mean, Travion Henderson didn't look right. 11 carries, 38 yards, and Mayan Williams 10 carries, 19 yards. Not only was the rushing game not impressive, but the offensive line to me, which has looked dominant all year long, couldn't really get a good push on running, and looked exposed sometimes, allowing CJ Stroud to get hit. So that's what concerns me is the offensive line yesterday getting exposed a little bit by Iowa's front.
I just think it's going to be, you look at, even though they've done well this year within the red zone, having, creating that short back, you're using that back of the end zone as another defender. You're cutting down the number of space, the amount of space. And I honestly think Ohio State's going to need JSN to play at some point. Probably in the playoffs. I think they can get away with it, not in the Big Tens. But I think if they're going to win that national championship, JSN, they could solidify it with JSN playing to his standards. Wouldn't you think?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't play him the rest of the year until, maybe the Big Ten championship game. I mean, he looked rough yesterday. At times, he just looked like he was in pain. He didn't look fully healed to me. I just wouldn't risk re-aggravating that hamstring in some of these games where they really don't need him. I mean, I'm looking at their schedule here right now. Penn State next week. I mean, I would say they would probably need him in that one. But after that, it's Northwestern, Indiana, Maryland, and then Michigan. I mean, maybe bring him back in the Michigan game, but I really wouldn't think about bringing him back until then.
Yeah, but Penn State's not going to be the whiteout. That's going to be that noon kickoff game. And honestly, if you could keep him out, because Harrison and Buka and Fleming can handle the load against them.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm saying I would like to have him then, but I would not play him. I would rest him. They said he was on a pitch count yesterday, but honestly, it looked like either he was still hurting or he re-aggravated the injury. I would not play him again until the Michigan game at the earliest.
Yeah,
because you're going to need him in that one.
Agreed.
So we'll see what happens. But, there's a lot of people, bad mouthing the Buckeyes. They won 54-10. I mean, Jesus Christ, 54-10 is still 54-10. I mean, I get it. It's Iowa, but their defense is pretty good. And they had a good, solid game plan, and give them credit. They played well, but they still gave up 54 points. So, whatever. Moving on, we've got to discuss Bama. I was worried about them. I thought they might slip up a little bit after the Tennessee debacle. But they played pretty good from the get-go yesterday. I thought that Bryce Young looked solid. I thought that Jahmyr Gibbs looked pretty good. I mean, he only had 10 carries, but he had a nice 19-yard touchdown run. But this Bama defense is what, to me, really came back strong from a horrible performance against the Vols. They held the Mississippi State, who's looked good on offense at times this year, to 6 points, and they scored all 6 of them in the fourth quarter with 2 field goals. So what did you think about Bama's performance, and what did you think about their defense especially?
Well, I mean, there was a stat I heard yesterday that kind of shocked me and blew me away, that Will Rogers has never thrown a touchdown pass against Alabama.
Thanks.
Isn't that crazy, with the Leach Pirate air raid, that he has not thrown one touchdown pass ever against Alabama?
Crazy.
I mean, that's a testament to that Alabama defense. I mean, Dallas Turner, Will Anderson, I mean, that's the bedrock of that team right there and then.
Yeah, and they showed up yesterday big time.
Yeah.
I was very impressed by that, because there might have been I was thinking maybe a little bit of a drop off, just losing potentially a little bit of confidence after that, giving up 52 points to the Vols, but they it didn't seem to bother them, and it certainly didn't hinder them against Mississippi State at all.
The one guy who I thought really upped his game from last week was Henry To'oTo'o. It just seemed like he was always out of position last week against Tennessee, and they just kept gashing them and gashing them. It was like death by a million cuts, and he really showed up well yesterday. I mean, 13 tackles, 7 solo, 1 tackle for loss. I mean, he really is living up to the expectations everybody thought of him when he came over.
Yeah, he looked rough in that Vols game. I mean, they were running right at him, and then whoever he was covering, it seemed like they were throwing it to him because he's a liability in coverage.
Yep.
But he played better yesterday. The whole defense did. I mean, Dallas Turner was in the backfield a lot. Even Will Anderson finally, got it back together, had a sack, had a 1.5 tackles for loss, had another QB hurry. Just looked more like what we've seen with the Alabama defense. They had 4 total sacks as a team, which is kind of what we expected the week before against that Vols offensive line that, to me, is unimpressive or was unimpressive coming into the season, but has really played out of their minds compared to the expectation. But this defense looked back on track to me after giving up 52 points. They only allowed 6 in the entire game yesterday. And like I said, all 6 came in the fourth quarter. So looks like Bama's still good, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, did you expect anything less? I mean, Saban, I don't think Saban's ever lost 2 games in a row. And so you knew they were going to come back, and this was going to be a rough week in Tuscaloosa. Prepare for this game. I would have been shocked if this didn't happen. I mean, I thought the offense was going to probably pump the brakes, and this is going to be more of a defensive show, showing that last week was a fluke of how much points we gave up. So,
yeah, no doubt. I guess it was more of a fluke, but I just didn't expect the defense to really turn it around that much in 1 week. But it looks like there was a big week of practice and a big turnaround for their defense altogether. So good for them, but nothing less from a Nick Saban-led team. The team that I did not expect to be where they're at, and I can honestly say I had no I just had no idea of how good this TCU team would be. I mean, they fired their coach last year, Gary Patterson, got rid of him after, a legendary coaching tenure there. They built a statue of him out front and then fired him in the middle of last season. And here comes McGuire coming in and taking over. And wow, I mean, I thought yesterday might be a slip-up game for them, but they handled their business and took out Kansas State 38-28. And Max Duggan, once again, tears it up. 280 yards, 17 of 26, 3 touchdowns, no picks. And, Kendre Miller ran it 29 times for 153 yards on that K-State defense. What's going on with TCU? How is this team 7-0, and how good are they?
Offensively, they're legit. I mean, Quentin Johnston is a hell of a receiver that people just don't realize how good he really is. He's just a special talent. And the one thing that I look back at this game is really a tale of two halves, or more importantly, a tale of, if Adrian Martinez doesn't get hurt, does K-State pull this game off?
I think so.
I mean, Adrian Martinez was, I can't believe these words are coming out of my mouth. Adrian Martinez looked like a good quarterback. And I mean, we've been waiting for that at Nebraska for how long? And now we're starting to see what we kind of predicted going into this year. K-State was going to be a solid team behind those two. He gets hurt. Will Howard comes in, and they just don't look the same. And Max Dugan just put it in a hyperdrive. They go 21, win 21-0 in the second half and pulled it off. I mean, all they do is just keep winning and winning and winning and winning.
Yeah, no, I agree with you big time. That's a point that we have to think about. I mean, Kansas State was up 28-17 at halftime.
Yeah,
and without their leader, without their fifth-year, starting quarterback Adrian Martinez, the offense was not the same. I mean, they scored 0 points in the second half. It was 28-17 at halftime. Obviously, you see the final score, 38-28. That was a big factor. And kudos to TCU's defense stepping it up. But I do think the loss of their quarterback had a lot to do with that. But look at TCU's schedule going forward. They've got West Virginia next week. Then they play Texas Tech. Then they've got a big one against Texas. Then they play Baylor and Iowa State. I mean, TCU really could potentially run the table.
Yeah. I mean, you look at the games in their schedule that I'd be worried about right now. I mean, the road games at Texas, at Baylor. Baylor looked good yesterday. Baylor looked like what we expected Baylor to be. Both those road games are going to be critical for them to play for the Big 12 championship and, strangely enough, potentially make the playoff.
I don't see where they fit in. I mean, I guess if they win out and then they play in the big, who would they play in the Big 12 championship? Oklahoma State? Are they in there?
I would probably say Oklahoma State right now, but I mean, that's another conference. It's just so deep. I mean, heck, a couple weeks ago we were talking about Kansas State, maybe Texas. I mean, I think if you got 2 losses right now, you're still in the mix, but you can't lose. If you're 2 losses, you can't lose again.
Yeah, Texas has got 3 losses now.
Oh, they're 3-2 in conference, 5-3 overall. I'm talking about just conference.
Oh, conference wins. Gotcha.
Yeah,
okay. Yeah. No, they could still be alive, but I mean, with TCU with no losses, I think they're pretty much, unless they have a major collapse, they're pretty much in line to play for the championship in the conference, right?
I mean, honestly, I think the best matchups would be K-State or Baylor. I don't think Oklahoma State or Texas in a Big 12 championship game would be, because it'd be a scoring fest.
Yeah.
Where Baylor and K-State have a defense that could actually potentially hold them down somewhat. So it'd be interesting to see how that whole thing plans out. But I mean, Sonny Dykes is having one hell of a year. I mean, granted, he knows these kids. I mean, he was at SMU, and I mean, his dad grew up in Texas as a high school coach at Texas Tech. He's been ingrained in this culture system, and he's doing a great job at TCU.
Yeah, no, he definitely is. I mean, I think right now, if I had to give out the Coach of the Year award, it's either him at TCU or potentially Heupel at Tennessee.
Yeah.
But those two are really the ones sticking out to me for doing the best job with what they've got. So we'll see how TCU the rest of the season plays out. But, I mean, think about what they've done so far. I mean, they dropped 38 on Colorado in the opener, 59 in game 2, 42 points week 3, 55 against Oklahoma after calling the dogs off. 38 against Kansas, who's a better team than we expected. 43 points against Oklahoma State in a tight one. and then 38 yesterday against Kansas State with a big second half. So this team can definitely score points, and the sky's the limit as long as they can keep doing that. So we'll see what happens. So the last game I want to talk about before we move on to our predictions, I do want to touch on for a moment the Texas A&M Aggies. I mean, this is a team. I want to remind everyone that they were ranked number 6 in the preseason polls. Okay, this is a team that everybody was high on the bandwagon. Sig them up, Aggies, sick them, and they're 3-4, and they are 1-3 in the SEC. Of course, they almost beat Bama 2 weeks ago, but they go down again to South Carolina, who has really, really righted the ship and turned things around on their season. I mean, this team did not look great to start the year. I was unimpressed with the back-to-back losses to Arkansas, 44-30, and then 48-7 at Georgia. I was like, whoa, what's going on? This team looks horrible, but they have since regained last year's form. And, Coach Beamer has really turned it around, and I think that was a big win for him yesterday. But what's your thoughts on where the Aggies are at, and South Carolina as well?
Well, let's just pump the brakes on South Carolina for a second here. I mean, let's look at their wins. They beat Georgia State. They beat Charlotte, who just fired Will Healy. They beat South Carolina State, a bad HBCU. They beat a Will Levis-less Kentucky. I mean, and now you beat A&M. I mean, quite frankly, if Sister Mary's of the Deaf, Dumb, and Blind were on their schedule right now, I would consider that their best win thus far. And then you look at their next games, home against Mizzou, at Vanderbilt. This team could go 9-2, and really their best win is Kentucky? I mean,
they're in the SEC, man. They played Kentucky on the date that it was on the schedule, and then they played at Kentucky and beat them on the road 24-14, and then they came home and beat Texas A&M. I mean, I'm not going to give them shit for beating two teams, one that was ranked number 6 in the preseason polls, and the other one that is still, I believe, ranked 13th right now, right?
So we're gonna keep Texas A&M's 6th ranking now and talk about that.
I'm not. I'm just saying that everybody thought they were so great. Everybody loves them.
Oh yeah.
In the preseason, I'm just saying that they can only play who's on their schedule when they're on it, and their schedule does suck. I'll give you that. But they can only play who they can play, and those are 2 big wins in a row for them. And I think they're going to beat Missouri, and I think they're going to beat Vanderbilt. And they'll be 8-2 heading into Florida, who also sucks. So they could beat that. They could win that game as well. And then the end of the season will show us how good they really are, because they've got to play Tennessee on the 19th of November, and then they've got to travel to the other Death Valley and play Clemson on the 26th. So however easy their schedules began, it's going to end pretty tough.
One person who I think has really just not had a good year is South Carolina's quarterback, Spencer Rattler. Yeah. Mind you, going into last season, he was not only the predictive Heisman front runner, but also the number 1 pick in the draft. And now this season, he has a QBR rating of 44.5. That's 96th in the country. He has 5 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. He went from a guy who was probably going to get drafted number 1, that if he came out now would not get drafted. If I were Spencer Rattler, stay in college.
Yeah, he ain't coming out. Year.
Do not come out. That would
He's not coming
death
out.
knell.
He's not coming out. There's nowhere to go. I mean, where's he going to go? I mean, unless he wants to go play in the Arena League, he's not going to the NFL. And they kind of been winning in spite of him.
Yeah,
which is what I'm talking about, the team getting better. They've gotten better around him. He hasn't gotten better. He seems to have gotten worse. And yesterday, 12 of 25 for 168 yards. At least he didn't throw any picks, but he didn't throw any touchdowns either. So all their touchdowns came on the ground. And, they also got a defensive touchdown as well. Xavier Legette scored. So, they're kind of winning in spite of him, and that's, I guess, good. But wow,
Shane Beamer is like his dad. They're going to have good special teams, they're going to have good defense, and they're going to manufacture a win.
yep.
I mean, there were times where Virginia Tech, all they had were defense and special teams until Jim Drunkenmiller's last couple years, and then a certain quarterback named Mike Vick. I mean, there was a lot of times Virginia Tech just did not have that, but their defense and special teams were always incredible.
Yeah, that's a true story. But, I give Beamer some credit, man. They, started off, I believe, were they 2-2? And,
Yeah.
Things could have gone downhill. They were 2-2 coming into that Kentucky game at Kentucky, and they won that. They won this A&M game. So, that's turning things around, and that's not easy to do, even against those two teams. But
do you think A&M's going to put pressure on Jimbo to bring in a new offensive coordinator and change up that offense? I think they have to.
They have to. I mean, what else are they going to do? They can't fire him. I mean, regardless of how bad the season gets. And I could see it potentially getting worse. I mean, they play Ole Miss next week. I mean, are they going to beat Ole Miss?
Yeah. I honestly don't think they're going to a bowl.
I mean,
which is strange because people were talking about them for a college football playoff berth.
Yeah, I wasn't. But, yeah, there were a lot of people. And they've got to play Ole Miss. They've still got to play Florida. Auburn sucks, but they got to play Auburn. And then they have to play LSU, too. I mean, I don't know. I mean, UMass looks like a game they could potentially win. I don't know how they snuck that one in at the end of their schedule. I guess Jimbo knew what he was facing here. And he was like, yeah, I got to get to at least 5-6 wins to get a bowl. I'm going to put UMass in the end of the schedule there. And he did that, but I don't really see him beating anybody else. I mean, I guess, Auburn and them both are so bad that someone will have to win that game, I guess, because you can't tie in college. But other than that, who knows? They look rough. And they can't fire him, man. They gave him that huge contract. All the money's guaranteed. There's no buyout in his contract. It's a guaranteed contract. And that's what they had to do to get him away from Florida State. And I'm not so sure they would do that again if they had the opportunity.
We forgot about one game. About Oklahoma State and Texas.
Oh, yeah, I skipped that one on the list here, but we do need to discuss that because real quickly we need to get our thoughts on that game because Oklahoma State had a huge, huge comeback in this game, and Quinn Ewers looked awful. It made me happy to see him struggle as bad as he did. I really got to give credit to the mullet man who no longer has a mullet. He's a good coach, dude. I mean, he really is.
It's amazing how everybody forgets about that year after year, but it's like 8, 9, 10, 11 wins every single freaking year. It's crazy.
Well, and he shapes his teams based on what they've got. Yeah. I mean, if they've got a really good running back, they'll run the ball. If they have a good quarterback and a Brandon Whedon or whoever throwing the ball, they'll throw it. I mean, he really shapes the team based on his personnel and adjusts each year. And yesterday, Spencer Sanders, I'm not really 100% sure how good he is, but yesterday he played well and 34, 57. I'm sure they'd probably not like him to throw the ball 60 times, but he did. And he still, had 391 yards, 2 touchdowns. And, Bryson Green, the wide receiver, had a big game, 133 yards. Stephon Johnson had a big game. He had 90 yards receiving. I mean, they had a lot of guys step up and play. And this is a huge win for Oklahoma State. What do you think about them going forward?
I honestly, the only thing that's holding them back right now is their pass defense. Honestly, you look at Quinn Ewers' numbers yesterday. One thing that really wasn't talked about much in the game was there were 20 plus mile an hour wins. And for Spencer Sanders to go 34 of 57 for 391 is really impressive. That means you've really got to have a good tight spiral.
Yeah.
Now, conversely, the person who has a release point between California and New York, Quinn Ewers, went 19 of 40 19 of 49.
Yeah.
With for 3 interceptions. Yeah, in the Big 12, it's going to be windy. And he better get his release point in a very much tighter spiral down. Otherwise, we're going to see more of this. I mean, this was his first true road game he's played.
Yeah, he looked bad at times. And it's just that, his attitude, he's got that kind of nonchalant, kind of, just kind of arrogant kind of persona about him.
Yeah.
And, when they're throwing touchdowns and they're blowing people out, people deal with it. But when they're getting beat on national television, it just isn't a great optic. And I don't know. I mean, Texas is another team that was ranked preseason top 10. And if you recall, your boy, I can't remember his name now, AJ McCarron, after the Alabama-Texas game, he's like, oh, that Texas, they're a top 5 team. They're not.
Yeah.
They're 5-3 now. And honestly, I could see them losing more games. I mean, they play Kansas State next week. I'm not so sure they're going to win that one. And then they play TCU, and then they've got Kansas and Baylor. So they've got 4 games left. All 4 of those games, who knows? I certainly am not just handing them any of those games.
And that game's at K-State. That's going to be a tough one because it is always windy in Manhattan.
Yeah.
That is that's a tough place to play.
Yeah, and we'll see if Adrian Martinez is healthy for that one and if he can come back. But all right, here we go. So this point, it is October 23rd. You had to vote today. The votes are all tied. The next vote takes the win. Who are you giving the Heisman Trophy to?
CJ Stroud.
Okay, I'm with you there.
Hendon Hooker's going to be close, but I would give it to CJ Stroud.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think CJ is just he's proven he's got the numbers, and he was there last year, finished 4th in the Heisman last year, and I think he's had an even better season this year. And I get it, he's got good wide receivers, but let's be honest. I mean, everybody said he had good wide receivers last year, and all those guys are gone. One of them is the number 1 wide receiver in the NFL for rookies, Chris Olave. The other one, Garrett Wilson, is tearing it up in New York. Go Jets. And the other one, Jackson Smith-Njigba, is on the sideline. So it's not like he's just got the same dudes over and over again and they're carrying him. It seems like there's a different guy every week out there. And the only constant is CJ Stroud. So I'm with you. I'm also a Buckeye homer, so your opinion probably carries more weight here.
If you were going to pick down the line, though, who would you pick after 1-2? That's where it gets interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think you still have to consider Bryce Young.
I would too. I mean, I've got like 3 people on that list at number 3, and one's Bryce Young, one's Caleb Williams, and the third, which you're not going to like me saying this, is Blake Corum at Michigan. I think I got him. A hell of a year.
I've got him on my list. I mean, everybody was so excited about throwing JJ McCarthy out there, but JJ McCarthy's not been the driving force of that Michigan team. It's been all their running game, and go Jets, Bradford. So we got that. We got the Heisman squared away. Who are your teams going to the college football playoff if you had to select today?
So the season ended yesterday.
Season ended after yesterday. It's done.
My 1 seed would be Georgia.
Okay.
They would play, screw it, TCU.
Wow.
Georgia would play TCU. Tennessee would play Ohio State.
Wow. Now that would be a good game.
If you would have asked me 5 minutes ago, like when we first started off the show, I would have said Clemson.
Yeah.
But honestly, if you put Clemson and TCU against each other, I started running the math in my head, and I'm like, I think TCU would win on a neutral field.
I think TCU's got a better resume. I really do.
I do too.
And they've got a hell of a lot better offense. So if I'm looking at DJU and I'm looking at Max Dugan, I'm taking Dugan all day long.
I remember when Dugan was getting recruited, because he came out of Sioux City, Iowa. And
Yep.
I remember Minnesota almost got him. And I was kind of shocked that we didn't. But the entire time I'm like, how is Iowa State and Iowa not in on this kid? Like, why are they not going after him? Like, what am I missing?
I don't know. He's a lot better than Spencer Petras. I'll tell you that much.
God, it's like worlds better. And neither school, I mean, they may have recruited him, but he never showed much interest in them. And look at now. I mean, my God, he has really stepped up. Okay, if the playoff was today, who's your 4?
Yeah, I've got Georgia. I've got Ohio State. That's 1. Georgia's number 1 seed. Ohio State is 2. I got Tennessee 3. And then my 4th, I've got Clemson because if it ended today, I would probably pick somebody different. But I'm just saying that I think that Clemson's going to end up getting in because of their schedule.
That's why I asked the question to begin with. The season ended today.
Yeah.
Who would you pick? If it didn't, I mean, I agree with you. I look at Clemson's schedule on the way out. Unless they stub their toe in ACC championship, I think you're going to have to put them in there.
Yeah, I think they're going to get in. That's why I'm saying them as number 4 because this was a pretty big win for them getting past. I mean, this was kind of their last test, in my opinion, as far as the ACC goes with the undefeated Syracuse team. I mean, they go to Notre Dame next week. I don't see much of a way that I hope I'm wrong, but I don't see much of a way that Notre Dame can beat them. Louisville after that, not good. Miami, laughable. And then South Carolina, who, has looked better, but as you said, their schedule has been pretty weak. So I don't really see anybody being able to beat them. So I'm just looking at it that way, I guess.
No, I went back and forth on Clemson and TCU. Now, I mean, now that we still got games to play yet, I mean, you and I both know Alabama can play their way back into this.
Oh, definitely.
Who wins that Tennessee-Georgia game? Then who wins the SEC title game? I mean, there's a lot of things that are going to happen between now and then that could really dictate a lot. I mean, heck, if Michigan-Ohio State's close, could both Michigan and Ohio State get in?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, that's why getting some of these undefeated teams knocked off is going to make it easier for the committee. Because I think if you're undefeated, they're going to have a hard time not keeping you in.
I agree. We got a lot of football left to play. That's a good thing. I can't believe that we're almost to November. It seems like August to November has kind of flown by. But we still got some big games. And like I mentioned, I mean, I think next week is going to be very interesting. We've got a bunch of huge games coming up on the slate in week 9, which will be next week. I mean, probably one of the bigger ones will be Ohio State, Penn State. That Notre Dame, Syracuse game will be interesting. You got Florida, Georgia. I don't give Florida much of a chance in that one. Oklahoma State, Kansas State is a big game. And then, beyond that, Kentucky and Tennessee. I mean, I don't think Kentucky really has a chance to beat Tennessee, but, stranger things have happened.
How is Kentucky ranked 19th?
I have no clue.
I mean, that's the problem that people don't get is like, well, they're the 19th rated team. They got to be good. I'm like,
they're not good.
It's not like you can start off and go 1, 2, 3, and then skip like 10 spots. Yeah. And then put the next person up. Someone's got to be ranked 4 and so on and so forth. And that's the problem you have today is there's like a large group of teams from 15 to 45 that are really interchangeable. And,
and what is Kentucky's? Who you were talking about South Carolina and their biggest win being Kentucky. Who's Kentucky's biggest win?
Let's go through the list.
I mean, they beat Miami of Ohio. They beat Florida,
and Mississippi State.
Yeah, I mean Mississippi State, who's lost every game since they got their ranking. So I mean, I don't know. I'm not 100% impressed with Kentucky. And,
I'm not either.
I think they're overrated as a team, but we'll see if they're any good. maybe they'll be able to slow down Tennessee, but I don't see it.
I mean, I would love to see Will Levis prove everybody wrong and go to the NFL and be a stud.
I don't see that.
I don't see it happening. I just don't. I've seen this song and dance too much where just because you're big and you have a big arm doesn't make you a good quarterback. It just means you're big and have a big arm. That's it.
I am not a huge Will Levis believer, so we'll see what happens. But appreciate everybody tuning in today. I appreciate all the comments and questions that came in from our loyal subjects. You guys are awesome. We wouldn't do the show if we didn't have a bunch of people watching. If the view list said 0, we would just stop and just call each other on the phone. So thank you all so much for tuning in. We love you all. We appreciate you. We hope everybody has a blessed Halloween holiday. I know my daughter is fired up. She got a couple costumes laid out and just has to choose which one she's going to wear on which day. So
what's she going to go as? Smokey?
No, definitely not. Maybe Brutus, but definitely not Smokey. But anyway, I hope everybody has a great Halloween, and I hope everybody enjoys the games next week as much as we enjoyed the games this week, as it was another awesome week in college football. And God, I love it. I mean, the NFL to me, it's cool, but it's just not the same. I watch it sometimes, but I just don't care who wins. And I find myself every college football game that I watch, I enjoy it. I pick a team, I cheer for them, and I have a great time. And NFL, I kind of watch it, and I'm pissed off at the end by the calls and the idiots playing. And can the Broncos win without Russell? Normally, I would say no, but after watching Russell play the last few weeks, I would say yes, Bradford, because I think you wasted $250 million because I think the Seahawks knew what they were doing. Getting rid of him. He looks like garbage. The rest of the Broncos look amazing. Kind of like the team we were talking about earlier, Iowa. Broncos remind me of Iowa in the NFL. The defense comes off the field and they just look over at Russ like, what are you doing? Like, we're tearing it up. We're sacking people. My boy from the Buckeyes, Baron Browning, has looked amazing for the Broncos. You got unbelievable defense all the way around. You got Joe Cooper, you got Bradley Chubb, they've got Patrick Surtain in the secondary, and then you got Russ back there who can't get a first down. So
we're going to compare Russell Wilson to Spencer Petras.
He's not that bad. He's not that bad.
Man, you want to kick a guy when he's down, you really kick him when he's down.
I'm just saying, man. I mean, look at last year. Russ was making all the excuses about the offensive line in Seattle, and they need to add people. Well, Geno Smith looks pretty damn good behind that same line. So,
but yeah, isn't that crazy? Geno Smith, where honest to God, I've never seen somebody have a worse pro career than that guy. And it seemed like he still hangs around and he looks solid in Seattle.
Yeah, he looks great. And you got to give that guy credit for resurrecting his career. He could have easily lost all his confidence after the Jets debacle and after the punch heard around the world when he got jacked in the jaw and kind of started his decline. He really, really put it all together and is having a great season and made John Schneider and Pete Carroll look pretty smart up there. So good for him. Go Broncos, Bradford. And we'll see everybody next week at the same time in the same Bat channel. Keep your chins up and buckle up. Peace out.
Later.